Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 121 of Sports Speak. Happy New Year 2023, our fourth year doing Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalecki.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Full show today. Rahill Jaiswal is here with us. Lots to get to in the sports world. It's been a busy last couple of days. Tristan Biesel is going to be joining us a bit later as well. And there's been some exciting things happening, but obviously we have to start on a bit of a somber note with what happened in the Monday Night Football game between the Bills and the Bengals. Once again, of course, thoughts and prayers are with Damar Hamlin and his family. The most recent news as of when we're recording this is that he remains in ICU in critical condition in a Cincinnati hospital. And I really kind of see this as sort of just a gut check for sports fans to remember that these athletes, in the end, are human beings. And, in an era in the NFL and college football, where we have been so focused on keeping the players safe. The scary thing about this is that Damar Hamlin did nothing wrong. It's not like he led with his head or his neck and put himself in a position where he was higher at risk. He tackled the way you're supposed to. So it's just really shocking to see something like that happen. And of course, some questionable reactions from certain people in the sports media world. Skip Bayless's tweet, maybe not the best timed. Bart Scott's comment that it was T. Higgins' fault is absolutely insane. So, but for Damar, hoping for the best for him. But again, a reminder of just how dangerous this game is. And while we always see sports as a spectacle, you have to remember those are human beings. This is their livelihood. And, they put themselves at risk each and every week. And while I'm probably to blame in this as well, I mean, there's people who feel like athletes, they make their millions of dollars. They don't face that many risks because they make so much money. Their lives are perfect. But at the same time, football players, they understand the risks. I mean, I go to Rutgers and we all hear about what happened to Eric LeGrand just over a decade ago and how his life got turned upside down by one tackle. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with Damar Hamlin, and hopefully he can recover. But just a shocking moment for the NFL. And once again, a reminder of what a brutal game it can be. But I got some work to do today, so I'm going to be turning the show over to Tim Moore the rest of the way. He'll be hosting, and we got Rahill Jaiswal and Tristan Biesel joining later. So, Tim, take it away.
Well, indeed. Well, first, I'll start off with the Damar Hamlin situation. I'll say it like this. Of course, it's devastating and unfortunate, but at least today, from what I've been able to see on the Pat McAfee show, actually, Ian Rappaport reported that there has been some positive ground made. Now, what does that mean? I'm not going to speculate, but that at least gives you a little bit more of a comforting feeling. But I do want to say it like this. Any sport, regardless of the situation, always creates the risk of tragedy. And how they mentioned on Sports Center, to me, is so realistic from a situation, the point, so many players talk about dying for this. But until it really happens, it just becomes so much of a cliche that you step back in a moment. And to me, getting to see, not just a reaction of fans, but players and everyone uniting together for a day, 2 days, regardless of the fact that it's a negative situation, sheds, to me, so much light into humanity in the world we have today. And that made me, almost practically shed a tear a little bit because of that fact. But I do want to say this as well, before I bring you in, Rio, because I put it like this as well. I look at an instance, of course, I'm a big NASCAR fan, the instance that happened to Dale Earnhardt Sr., where he tragically passes away, and then there becomes a massive change in a positive direction for NASCAR and the sport in regards to safety. Now, again, football's had its criticism with head injuries and so on, based upon from what I have discovered and done my research on. This isn't, of course, related to a head injury. It's more of blunt force trauma to the chest. But at the end of the day, granted, if Damar Hamlin lives or not, of course, you hope the positive end. I think instances like this create a positive opportunity for the NFL to create other safety measures to only build upon and learn upon from instances like this. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not saying that any other instance is underlooked, but this happens on tendency, believe it or not, about 15 to 16 times a year in sports in general, not just all football related. And really, not a lot of it gets covered because a lot of it either happens out of the country or in other instances, and not the highest level of professional sports. Which just leads me to bring this point that overall, because it got such a national, to a national level, it could create positive for sports in general, which I guess makes me create this question for you, Rahill, before we continue moving forward and get your thoughts. You know, sometimes negatives shed a light, in that create a lot of mourning and a lot of a lot of upsetting scenarios. But in this scenario, when you think about it down the road, can you truly say, not just for the NFL, but also other sports moving forward, getting to experience this situation firsthand at a national level with millions of people watching, really do have the opportunity to an extent to create a positive like it has already to this point?
Well, the issue is, Tim, I mean, we all talk about safety in the NFL, but let alone we all talk about safety, they implement a new rule and people will complain because there's no possible way. I mean, they've created the safety with the quarterback position. That's created a whole controversy about roughing the passer calls and how to tackle. So really, I don't know what rule they can certainly change because, as Eddie said, there was no hit to the head. I mean, Hamlin did everything right. It was just a normal tackle. And, it's just a real, it is a real gut punch. It's just a shocking scene to see a 24-year-old, someone who's fully healthy, just collapse on the field like that. I mean, it reminds me of the Euros last year. I don't know if you guys saw Christian Eriksen, fully fit, healthy, used to be one of the best players in the world. Maybe you can make the argument still up at the top of the level. Thankfully, he's still playing, but he collapsed right on the center of in the center of the field, really without any sort of contact whatsoever. Thankfully, he's okay now. We pray Damar Hamlin, is okay, and that we can all move on. But yeah, I mean, some of the reactions, absolutely disgusting what Skip Bayless and Bart Scott had to say. I mean, Skip Bayless, I understand what he's saying, but the fact that that was the first thing that went to his head after the incident occurred, it wasn't as if, he didn't say prayers up or anything. The first thing he talked about was the NFL schedule. That is completely insensitive, and it just shows what a clown he is. Bart Scott claiming that it's T. Higgins' fault, absolutely stupid. Again, I don't know how these people still have jobs on the air. It's absolutely disgusting. But prayers up to him and his family. I think one positive is that the sports world, no matter who you support, no matter what team, have all come together. You've seen some great videos of fans, staying together. Bengals fans standing outside the pouring rain, having a little, a shrine for Damar Hamlin, and people coming together and praying in unison for him, regardless of what team you support. That's just a really great feeling, because we always talk about the negatives that sports fans can be when two teams play, but to see people unite and sort of have one unite and all come in unison, it's good to see.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, I mean, in the aspect of Skip Bayless, listen, I get it, in regards to there's a tight schedule, but that was definitely not the first response you should have to a situation at all like that. And I mean, it is a reality point, which we will talk about a little bit, at least in a little bit within the next topic about the NFL. But I do actually just want to clarify in regards to, from a rule perspective, I don't think much can get changed. But I think, maybe from a padding perspective, trying to add something maybe.
Okay.
Batting that can, and not just on offense, but also defense as well, all players batting, that can maybe decrease that little bit of blow and impact for when you have direct chest contact. And again, I understand this tackle happens, 9 out of 10 times, and really, for the most part, 10 out of 10 times, and everything's okay. But again, instances like this create learning points, and regardless of positive or negative, I think it could create, in terms of outcome, it could create a positive outcome for the NFL and really other sports moving forward. I like to bring this example, just like how we saw for the first time this offseason. We saw the NFL utilize concussion caps, which is something that we had never seen before in training camp. And a lot of teams found a lot of positive ways through it, having a lot less concussion injuries earlier on the season. And that's only one instance of what I'm talking about, of making the smallest into a positive. If the NFL could find a way to do that, that'd be absolutely great. But now transitioning over to the NFL, because again, we don't know when this is going to be rescheduled in terms of the Bills and Bengals. It has big stipulations in regards to who could be the 1 seed in the AFC. But I guess I want to start with our New York Giants first, because of course we're in the playoffs, positive in that way. But my question is simply this. There's been a lot of references this week, a lot of talking about Tom Coughlin in regards to what he did back when the Giants won a Super Bowl during the Patriots' perfect season, about how going into the final week of the season, at the time, week 17, the New York Giants ended up playing its starters to try to break the streak against New England. Now, of course, they didn't beat them, but down the road, they ended up winning the Super Bowl game. And Tom Coughlin specifically references that moment because of the fact that he truly believed it helped create that atmosphere to help build the Super Bowl run. Well, the New York Giants, of course, have nothing to gain or lose. They're clinched in the 6th spot. Who are they going to play? Are they going to play, San Francisco? Are they going to play Minnesota? I'm hoping it's Minnesota. But the fact of the matter is that with all this, all these questions going into the future, because think about it like this. Do you play Daniel Jones? Do you play starters, knowing that, let's say, the Bengals and the Bills have a Week 19 standalone game and things get pushed back a week? What do you do there? Because do you want Daniel Jones sitting for 2 weeks, or do you take the risk, again, not knowing this week, and let's say you play 1 week and you're playing next week, to keep momentum? There's a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I'll say it like this. Whatever Daboll chooses, I'm just glad the Giants are in the playoffs, and that's more than I can ask for. I just want us to play competitive football into November and December this year, and I got that wish. So whatever happens from this point is only a perk if we go further into the playoffs. Likely, of course, not to be the case. But at the end of the day, I just don't know what to say in regards to what you would do with Daniel Jones, Rahill.
It's a tough question. It is. Now, I'm on the precaution of maybe you play them for a half, give them a couple series, because given this team this season, somebody is going to get hurt if you play them the full games. That's just the way the season is getting, with the amount of players that have dropped, Azeez Ojulari, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, all of them being in and out of the lineup, Daniel Jones battling injuries as well this year, Saquon Barkley being nicked up. Something is going to happen. And I don't want to be in a situation where a key impact player gets hurt in a game that we're just trying to win because Philly screwed us out of the playoffs 2 years ago. I really do think, now again, I don't know what the schedule is going to be moving forward. Do they even play the game? Do they just void it? Do they go off win percentage? I don't know. I'm willing to take the risk. I think you play them for at least a half. Let them get some reps in, but after that, there's really nothing in this game for the Giants. Put Tyrod Taylor in. You're still giving yourself a decent chance to win the game with Tyrod. It's not like you're throwing the game away, but yeah, play them for a half, see where it goes. If you want to play them a little more, you can do that, but I don't know about playing them all 4 quarters.
Well, let's look at the NFC side for a moment, because of course we still don't know who the Giants are going to be playing, but moving forward into this week, this is the one thing I love about the NFL. The fact that they created a scenario where you're playing divisional play to round out the season, to me, is one of the greater things that this league could do. And you look at it, stipulations. The Giants beat the Eagles. The Eagles are not going to be the 1 seed. They very well could fall as low as the 2. I don't think they could fall to the 3, theoretically speaking.
I don't think so.
Because what, Minnesota has 4 losses and they have the
And they
head-to-head.
have the tie, and they have the head-to-head win over Minnesota.
So theoretically, they can't fall lower than the 2, but that means that they would be playing whoever becomes the 7 at the end of this week. Now, of course, if you look at it, if again the Giants win, San Francisco would likely become the 1. And again, let's be honest. I feel, despite all the adversity of the team, I still feel the 49ers are really the biggest threat in the NFC to win the Super Bowl. I mean, Brock Purdy is playing out of his mind. Christian McCaffrey's been, granted, do you think the trade's a little bit insane? I still do, in terms of value they traded away for Christian McCaffrey, but Christian McCaffrey's been healthy and he has a chance, and has been an impact player to this point, which again, just makes me lead this question, moving forward into the NFC playoff picture. If the 49ers get this 1 seed and get this bye, do we think they could go all the way? Because I think they can.
Absolutely. They have the best defense in the league. Here, listen, Brock Purdy, what Kyle Shanahan has done with Brock Purdy is unbelievable, because he's only putting him in positions where he can be successful. He's not asking him to do too much. They're not asking Purdy to sit back and throw the ball 50 times a game straight from the pocket. What they're doing is they've realized, hey, this guy's got a little athleticism to him. Let's roll him out in the bootlegs. Let's let him take some carries. Let's let him rush, do what he is most comfortable with. Now, they also do run a lot of bootlegs with Jimmy G, so it's not as if they're changing the whole system. But look at this roster, okay? They've got the best defense in the league. They've probably got the defensive player of the year in Nick Bosa, okay? And on the offensive side of the ball, Christian McCaffrey. All right, Kyle Shanahan is already an offensive guru when it comes to running the football. You give him another toy like Christian McCaffrey to work with, I mean, you see the results. Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. They got weapons all around on the offensive side, and you complement that with Kyle Shanahan's offensive genius and play calling, plus their number 1 defense. Might I mind you, the year they got to the Super Bowl, they had the best defense in the league as well. So, I mean, I bet when you have a number 1 defense, you can beat anyone on your day. I'm fully confident this Niners team can win a Super Bowl. I really do think that if they were to match up against a team like maybe in the AFC, like the Bengals, the Bills, the Chiefs, I'm fairly certain that they could go head to head with them and probably win. So yeah, I'm not, no one's counting out the 49ers at this point.
Well, and now let's look towards the bottom half of the NFC, not in terms of the standings, but at least in the playoff picture. Of course, we referenced, regardless of who ends up getting the 1 seed, the Eagles or the 49ers, one of these 2 teams, unless the 49ers, of course, lose and the Vikings win, will end up having to play whoever wins the 7 seed. Now, it seems like for Washington, they've gone absolutely insane. They are starting Taylor Heineke, but then plan to play Sam Howell, which to me is mind-boggling.
And they played Wentz last weekend.
Yep, it just doesn't make sense. Carson Wentz is. I don't understand Ron Rivera's mentality. Oh, we need to finish drives. We need to put together drives. I don't know what he's looking at. But Taylor Heineke, granted, I understand maybe doesn't score 30, 40 points a game, has done a far much better of a job putting away drives than what Carson Wentz has done over the last 3 years. I'm sorry, you were saying something?
Oh, no, I was completely agreeing with you. I thought Heineke was having a pretty good season. So I don't know. I don't understand why you'd go away from him in your best situation. You put in Wentz, and then now you're going back to Heineke. It's a mess. It's a mess.
Well, of course, in terms of the 3-way tie right now, you have Seattle, who is barely living after getting Tyler Lockett back last week and having a productive win over the New York Jets, who, believe it or not, through all the chaos, and everyone thought they were going to be the team that was battling with the Dolphins for the last spot in the AFC, ends up fading out of the playoff picture. You look in the NFC side, again, it's like Seattle's there. They have a chance. They play the Rams this week, one of the weaker teams in the NFL this year, believe it or not, after winning a Super Bowl. Baker Mayfield's their quarterback. Anything can happen, but you can't count out the Rams defense. And you look at the other side. Well, you have a game that, in my opinion, is if all the chaos didn't happen, would have been, in my opinion, the favorite for Sunday Night Football, would have been one of the best to watch, this season. You have the Lions and the Packers. The Packers, I mean, they're literally running the table. This is
Yep.
one of the better runs of Aaron Rodgers' career in regards to comeback stories, which you look at the three. I know we've talked about the Lions. Oh, who could do damage if they make the playoffs? I feel the Packers, what they've been able to do over the last 4 weeks, could actually do damage if they continue to play good offense, because this is what we know Aaron Rodgers to be. And even last game where the run game took over, you've seen production from Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. It's like the Packers are starting to mesh at the right time. But is it too late? I just don't know.
Well, you talk about meshing at the right time. The main thing that's meshing at the right time is the defense. Remember, we all knew the Packers offense was going to take a hit without Devontae Adams. We all knew that their numbers were going to be down. We all knew Rodgers was not going to have a better season they did last year. But remember at the start of the year when this team was sitting at 4-8 halfway through the season, everyone was asking the question, what the hell is wrong with this defense? This was supposed to be a top 10 unit entering the season, and they're not at top 10 form yet. But the way they have played the last 3 weeks, I think the stat is in the first 10 or 11 games, they had, I want to say like 7 or 8 takeaways. And in the last 3 games, they've had like 9 or 10 takeaways because they had back-to-back 4. They had 4 takeaways against the Vikings this week, last week, and they had 4 takeaways against the Dolphins. So this team is and credit to Jair Alexander, he backed up a smack talk, locking down Justin Jefferson. So this defense is becoming more opportunistic. And remember, the year the Packers went on the magical run and won the Super Bowl, their defense was a huge part of it. It was maybe the only year Rodgers has had a consistent defense. And no, Rodgers is not having the best year. But again, these 2 running backs, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones, everything that the Packers want to do is based off the run game. When they weren't, for some reason, when they were in that bad stretch, it was too much hero ball, Tim, too much deep shots. They got away from what they were built to do. What they are built to do is play solid defense and run the football, and then let Aaron Rodgers make those magical throws. Christian Watson has come up down the stretch. Romeo Doubs had a couple big games. Allen Lazard, that's still a pretty good receiving trio if you think about it. Doubs, Watson, and Lazard. That's still 3 fairly good wide receivers. So this Packers team is more than capable of doing damage. Now, they're not going to have the Lambeau Field home field behind them. They might have to go to Santa Clara, but they match up against the Vikings. They can pull off an upset if they somehow get a date with the Eagles. They kept pretty close with the Eagles when they played them on Sunday Night Football. So the Packers can make some noise. They're getting hot at the right time. So I wouldn't count them out, especially with the way that defense is playing.
Well, I was just also about to say it'd be very fitting if the Packers end up making it. The team they're going to end up playing is the San Francisco 49ers to open up the playoffs. That just seems to be Aaron Rodgers' kryptonite as it's been over past years. But let's flip over to the AFC side real quick, because when I look at this AFC side, there is a lot that can happen, in this AFC side. Of course, you still don't know who the 1 seed is, but it doesn't really feel like, of course, there's been good offenses, the Chiefs, the Bills, and, the Bengals as well. But I just don't know anyone from this AFC. I feel like can break out. Even the Miami Dolphins, I know they haven't played great of late, and they've lost a lot of games. And luckily things falling their way put them in a spot. And by the way, I can't ignore the Chargers offense either. But at the end of the day, there's a good possibility that any of these AFC teams can really stand out in the playoffs, which makes it a real crapshoot.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the conference right now. You've got the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, the Jags, the Chargers, the Ravens, and for now, it's New England in that 7th spot. There's this 3-way tie. Hell, Pittsburgh is not out of it yet. I don't know where Pittsburgh has come from, but it just seems like Mike Tomlin is allergic to having a losing season, because we all thought it was going to be this year. We all thought it was going to be last year, and all of a sudden now they have a chance to finish 9-8 and somehow get into the postseason. But I mean, those top 3 teams, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills, to me, they're all right next to each other. They're all so evenly matched, and they all have unbelievable dynamite quarterbacks. They have unbelievable offenses. It can really go anyway. Hell, watch out for Jacksonville. You talk about the way they've been playing. Doug Peterson has got Trevor Lawrence finally looking like the number 1 overall pick, a fringe top 10 quarterback. Justin Herbert, we all know what he brings to the table with that offense. they're finally putting it together. The Chargers, Herbert's always had the big numbers, but as a team, they're finally putting it together. The Ravens, they should get Lamar Jackson back in time. We all know what he can do. And whoever gets the 7th spot, whether it be Miami, their offense is still unbelievable. Now, Tua's not playing great. They have some injuries, but if Pittsburgh gets in, they've got the experience. And if New England gets in, I mean, Belichick has the experience to get back in the postseason. So you just don't know what's going to happen with this AFC team. It is a real possibility that any of these AFC teams can win the Super Bowl. Now,
and I want to give you one last thought real quick, Rahill, before we transition over. But at the end of the day, we still don't know who gets these last spots in the playoffs. But if you're to pick 2 teams right now, who do you see going to the Super Bowl and why?
Oh, okay. So we'll start with the AFC. My pick to go back to the Super, I think the Bengals go back to the Super Bowl in the AFC, if I'm being completely honest. Then in the NFC, I think it's the 49ers. I think we're destined for a Bengals 49ers Super Bowl with the way I see it right now. The reason I'm picking the Bengals is, to me, they can match the Chiefs and Bills offensively, but I think their defense is more consistent enough. They can get pass rush. They've got good secondary help. The Bills are beat up in the secondary. The Chiefs defense has been iffy all year. So that's why I'm going to go with them. And the 49ers, we just talked about, with the way they're playing, with the way they're calling plays, I think it's going to be a Bengals 49ers Super Bowl.
I would agree 1,000% in regards to seeing the 49ers there. Again, I still feel the AFC's crapshoot. You could see the Bills, you could see the Chiefs, you could see almost anyone in the Super Bowl there on the AFC side, which is going to make it a very, very entertaining NFL playoff this year. But Rahill Jaiswal, I want to thank you so much, of course, for coming on here to Sports Speak episode 121. And next time you come on, we're going to talk a little bit of NBA down the road as well, because there's a lot of chaos going on right now in both of those conferences. However, when we come back for part 2 with Sports Speak, I'll be here with Tristan Biesel to talk a little bit more about the Green Bay Packers, as well as much more in just a couple moments. So don't go anywhere. You're watching Sports Speak, again, episode 121. We welcome you back to episode 121 of Sports Speak. I'm Tim Moore, and he's still doing a little bit of stuff, as you know, on the top of the show. But I'm here with Tristan Biesel here for the second part of the show. And Tristan, again, first off, glad to have you back on the show. The last time we saw you, a lot of chaos going on.
God, how long has it been? God.
I want to say it's been a year, if not 8 months. It's definitely been a year.
It was a year, because last time we were here, we were talking about Rodgers and The Last Dance, and now we're here about a year and some change later with the Packers fighting for a playoff spot on Sunday Night Football.
Well, let's talk about the Packers. Of course, I kind of mentioned Rahill. I kind of said it wrong. I said, it'd be the game I'd want to see on Sunday Night Football. That we originally weren't going to get. Of course, we are getting it on Sunday Night Football. But talk to me first off, how you're feeling from a Packers fan perspective. They going in against the Lions, season on the line. Do they have what it takes?
I believe we do. This defense, especially after the performance against Minnesota, remind me a lot of the opportunism of that 2010 team, capitalizing off the turnovers and the offense coming in and capitalizing. Rodgers is starting to hit his stride, and I will die on this mountain. I don't want any other quarterback when it's time to clutch up and make the playoffs more than Aaron Rodgers. And the young receivers are starting to come up. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Robert Tonyan's being brought back into the fold. And we're also using A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones as those receiving backs. The running game is strong. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are a two-headed monster in the backfield. And I believe with how subpar the Lions have been playing as of late, especially against Carolina, I think the run game would definitely suit us well. But how can you sit here and talk about the offense and not talk about Christian Watson? I mean, his hyper-accelerated growth to one of the top 20 receivers in the league has been something to be proud of. Ever since he had those 3 touchdowns against Dallas, I was like, hope this isn't a fluke. And he has absolutely proved me wrong. He is indeed not a fluke, and he is, without a shadow of a doubt, wide receiver 1 for the Green Bay Packers.
Without a doubt, indeed, he's been wide receiver 1. But the question is as well for Green Bay is, how do you approach Detroit? Of course, the fact of the matter, you mentioned the running game's been working, but my criticism of LaFleur this season has been, you talk about about wanting to give more touches to guys like Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, but yet you mix it up and then go the opposite direction come game day. I mean, I think about it like this last week where Aaron Jones was averaging, I think it was 10 yards per carry, but still barely even cracked the double-digit mark in carries. And again, I know AJ Dillon's been good. He's got his production. Of course, he had that big game before he had a concussion. But at the end of the day, you can't ignore the fact, too, that this Lions defense, if there's anything they've been good against this year defensively, it's been stopping the run as compared to the pass game, which just, again, makes me lead the question because there's no easy way to beat the Detroit Lions. You find Dan Campbell in a situation where there should be nothing but motivation on his end, of course, to win this football game. There should be nothing but, chaos to ensue from start to finish. But I feel like when it's all said and done, no matter what way you approach, and Tristan, I don't know if you feel the same way, but as we know, the Lions offense has been good this season from start to finish as well. I feel like the only way you could beat the Detroit Lions is if you're going on an offensive slugfest where there's at least 30 points put on the side on each side of the board if you want to have a chance of winning this football game.
Absolutely. And the Detroit Lions, they're swing from, I believe it was 1-6 to winning, I believe it's 7 of 9, right?
Yep, 7 of 9. So they started the year off 1-6, and Dan Campbell has chugged them along. I think they won it was like 5-6 games in a row before finally losing one.
Yeah, it was Carolina, and they played very ugly football that day.
Yeah.
But this offense, again, I've always been a supporter of Jared Goff. I believe that once he got thrown into this system, and now that he's got weapons, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams coming back into the fold, Jamal Williams, obviously, in the running game. I'm very confident in the Packers' chances. The Detroit defense has been good at stopping the run, and considering we are still a little bit banged up on the offensive line front, and the offensive line hasn't been the best all year, it's going to be really hard to run the ball. But like you were pointing out, the Detroit secondary has been a little bit of a problem, and I think Watson, Dobbs, Tunyon, Cobb, they could all attack. And it's going to be a slugfest, like you said. I'd say above 35 points for each team. This is going to be one of the more high-scoring games of the season.
And I'm hoping that it sets the standard as the best Sunday night football game of the season. Of course, that's going to be a little bit hard to set, but there's going to be a very, very strong possibility. But you have to remember as well, to get to that point, there's still the scenario, of course, where the Seahawks could come out victorious against the Rams, which again makes me lead this question when you look at those two teams that are going to be playing off. Are you worried about a game like that? Because again, not San Francisco. Of course, they could be the team the Packers could be playing in the future if they make the playoffs. But for Seattle, it felt like this team was falling apart. But yet somehow, some way, they sneak a win in against the Jets. They have a chance to make the postseason as well. What do you think on that? Do you think Seattle loses this week?
I don't think so. I do think Seattle wins. That Rams team is absolutely beat to hell. What's the offense? The entire offense is injured. The defense has been subpar, at least I'd say, without Aaron Donald in the fold. And Seattle's, like Detroit, very hungry football team. They have been in absolute free fall. And then you beat the Jets, and now you're sitting here. If you guys win, you give Detroit nothing to play for but pride. And you saw at the end of last year how hungry Detroit got to start winning football games. If you're looking for a team to play with nothing but pride on the line, the Detroit Lions are that team. And Seattle's going to win that game against the Rams, absolutely. But I still think the Packers beat the Lions and snub Seattle.
And again, that's always a possibility, hence why it's on Sunday Night Football. And I guess the last question to you, Tristan, in regards to this. If Green Bay makes the playoffs, now again, it can only be, it theoretically could still be any mix of the three, but really the two. We don't know what with Philadelphia. If they win or lose to New York, it could be the 49ers they could play. Or if the 49ers somehow manage a way to lose, you could play Minnesota. Minnesota ends up with a win. But regardless, and the 7 spot, you'd be playing the 2. In my honest opinion, it would likely be San Francisco. And we know that's been Aaron Rodgers' kryptonite over the years. And I know I was talking about this with Rahill before earlier on the show. But if you play the San Francisco 49ers, what do you have to do to beat a team like that, considering they may be the best put together team to not just win the NFC this year, but maybe win the Super Bowl?
I honestly agree with that statement. I think apart from Philadelphia, San Francisco has been the best put together team all season, even with Trey Lance going down early, Jimmy Garoppolo going down, Brock Purdy coming in and playing lights out football. There's always a possibility that we could play San Francisco. We could play Philadelphia. We could end up playing Minnesota. Am I confident against Philadelphia and Minnesota? Philadelphia, if Jalen Hurts isn't playing, and Minnesota, absolutely. I mean, after the absolute shellacking we gave them on Sunday, I'm confident that we go to Minnesota and beat them. But San Francisco is a team it's been the same formula for the past couple seasons. Dynamic offense, brutal defense. And with the addition of Christian McCaffrey, it gives you an extra element of surprise. Are they going to go Debo? Are they going to go Ayuk? Are they going to go McCaffrey? You don't know. And with that element of surprise, I mean, am I confident against San Francisco? No. We've seen how Aaron Rodgers plays against San Francisco. Like you said, it's Aaron's kryptonite. I don't think any other team or player has had such a negative impact on Aaron Rodgers' play than the San Francisco 49ers. If we play San Francisco, I'm banking on Brock Purdy, the lights are too bright for him, and he beats himself. Will that happen? Probably not. The kid's been playing lights out football for the past month and a half. But there is a level of confidence going into the playoffs. We are, as of late, we've been playing great football. We've been playing complementary football. I think that game against Minnesota was the most complete game we've had all season. And to be the 7, you're going to have to go all the way. You're going to have to be the road warriors that 2010 team was. And I keep drawing parallels to that team because, like I said, opportunistic defense, great offense. We just need to see Aaron Rodgers snap out of this funk that he's been in all year and revert back to the back-to-back back-to-back MVP.
And that's one thing that can't be ignored. And I'll say it like this: the fact that you still have to remember, Aaron Rodgers is the MVP, the back-to-back MVP. He earned that title for a reason. And the fact of the matter is he still has a lot of good football left to play. The question is that is he playing good enough football at this point in the season? He had it done. Only time shall tell, and we shall see. But it's funny you mentioned Mr. Irrelevant of Brock Purdy. On that side, well, Mr. Irrelevant has an opportunity to become relevant, whether he likes it or not. And what happens, again, we shall see. But just like how I mentioned with Rahill earlier, granted, I know you weren't here, Tristan, about how the AFC side is a crapshoot. Anyone can win it. It makes you a little bit intrigued because the NFC side, you kind of can pick out the teams that look strongest. But
the NFC, definitely.
Predictable. Yeah, I feel like there's going to be upsets. There's going to be opportunities. And I would not be surprised if we see it as well on the NFC side at all. And I guess I'll finish off the NFL topic with you on this one question. Of course, I know you mentioned the 49ers in regards to being Rodgers' kryptonite and so on, and how you wouldn't be so confident. But if there was any team, just any team in general, you would want to be playing in, let's say, the NFC Championship game, of the options there are going into the playoffs, assuming the Packers make the playoffs, who would it be and why?
Oof. It honestly depends on who we're going to have to play to get there. Because if we play San Francisco in the wild card round and we could get bounced or we advance, and I believe we would play Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's not. Be whoever's the highest seed left. And it could be Tampa. It could be. Ooh.
So pathologically speaking, if you win the first wild card game, beat the two, so as the moment, that'd be San Francisco. You would then have to beat Philadelphia to go into the NFC Championship game.
Oh.
One.
And with how many rushing yards Philadelphia put up on us in that Sunday Night Football matchup, how would you attack that game against Philadelphia? You wouldn't know. I guess time will tell. I could probably answer this question if the Packers make the playoffs. And I know what the picture looks like. But right now, the 1 seed's still up for grabs. Philadelphia's been in free fall since Jalen Hurts went out. The 1 through 3 is still up for grabs. It's just a matter of who gets that 1, who gets the 2, who gets the 3. Tampa's locked at the 4. It just depends on how everything shakes out. And you mentioned how the AFC is an absolute crapshoot. I thought earlier on in the season, the NFC was going to be top heavy. It was going to be the Eagles, the Vikings, or the Niners. One of those 3 teams. And now, as we come down to the end of the season, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody has been playing less than complimentary football. Every game's been a crapshoot. And me and my dad were talking about it. It's like everybody's been playing crappy football. There hasn't been a team to stick out and be that Super Bowl favorite that we want to see this time of year. The AFC, Cincinnati, Baltimore could have a chance. Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati, those teams obviously are always going to have a chance to make that run, especially with Kansas City with the presumed MVP, Patrick Mahomes. If we make it out of the wild card round, it's going to be a crapshoot, and I'm all here for it.
100% make for good TV, and again, it'll make for an exciting NFL playoffs, regardless of what teams make it. Again, I really do think this is one of the better playoffs in recent history in terms of exciting after exciting game from start to finish.
Exactly, and no matter how you slice it, every game is going to be an exciting game this postseason. You got a Giants team who, under Brian Dable, have found a new identity. Daniel Jones went from a quarterback who's probably going to get cut to a quarterback who's probably going to get excited alongside Saquon Barkley.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. Now more of a discussion for the future, just because of the fact that, well, I do believe Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley would be back. I still have a lot of questions on who you put the franchise tag on, because in my opinion, I would probably put it on Saquon Barkley rather than Daniel Jones. But a lot of people will say the opposite end of you need to put it on your quarterback rather than the running back in terms of price value. But I do want to shift topics, of course. We talked about the NFL and the playoffs a little bit. But let's talk about Major League Baseball for a little bit. Your Chicago Cubs making a lot of big signings.
We made a lot of noise.
Well, yeah, a lot of noise. But I will also say last year, this team made a little bit of noise in terms of a process of a rebuild. Are we ready to see the Cubs maybe start to play 500 baseball again, despite what's really been a short rebuild? It's only been a year and a half, theoretically, since the Cubs
started. I mean, you blow up the Golden Core a year and a half later, we're sitting with arguably a top 5 shortstop in baseball, Dansby Swanson. And I asked myself the question, when we signed Dansby, what are you going to do with Nico Horner? What are you going to do with Nick Madrigal? And I'm pretty sure you got to move Nico over to second base, because Dansby's a top 5 shortstop in baseball. He's got the contact. He's got the power. You can probably ask of him to bat 280, close to 300, and he can do it. You can ask Nico to bat 280, close to 300, and you can do it. Same with Ian Happ. We haven't had those guys that can bat for contact, bat for average. And hell, we have no power. We have no power hitters. Apart from Schwindel when he's healthy, Wisdom when he's healthy. But are we ready to see the Cubs play 500 baseball? No. I will say no, because how volatile our bullpen is. Our bullpen sucks. It's the starting rotation is probably going to be Stroman, Tyone, Hendricks, Smiley, and Sampson. Those are going to be your 5. And then it's just whatever the hell we're doing with the bullpen. because after we traded away David Robertson and Scott Efros, the bullpen has just been god awful. We would have been in a lot more games, in my opinion, if the bullpen wasn't so atrocious. Then again, you can't really put all the blame on the bullpen when we had guys going through hitting spells where nobody could hit. But we're definitely going to see us getting closer to 500. We may be a game or two off of 500 and be 10 games out of a wild card spot. Because the NL is so absolutely stacked this year. You can't play 500 baseball in the NL and have a shot making postseason. You just can't do it this year.
Well, you look at that NL Central, the Pirates are still, in my opinion, one of the worst teams in baseball. Regardless,
I think they are the worst team in baseball. I believe they are.
Years they're the worst franchise in sports history, but that's another debate for another time. You look at the Brewers; they're just kind of up and down. It seems like for the Brewers, if I'm being honest with you, the thing about Milwaukee, they always exceed expectations. Rather than expectation is low or high, that doesn't matter. It just seems like Milwaukee is just always surpassing what's expected of them. But you look through the rest of that NL Central, and the Reds, of course, they're the Reds.
Yeah.
The only team that's really a threat is the Cardinals. And again, even then, the Cardinals didn't really do that much this offseason to really bolster that team and try to make it a step up, which, again, just makes me lead this question. Of course, you have to really win the division, the NL Central in particular, I think, to make the playoffs. I don't think we'll see a wild card team from there this year. But this may be the weakest we've ever seen the NL Central. I shouldn't say ever, but at least in the last 15 years, considering how consistent at least 2 or 3 teams have been in that division every year. Is there an opportunity, I would say, granted, I know you think the Cubs may not get to 500 baseball, but it's fair to say there's an opportunity they'll at least get second in the division this year?
They honestly could. I mean, the Cardinals did nothing apart from poach Wilson Contreras from the Cubs. That's it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Wilson to death. But Wilson Contreras really doesn't bump your team up to a surefire World Series lock. And the Brewers, exceeding expectations low or high. The pitching will always be lights out. If their bats can get, say pitching's right here. If the bats can get right here, that team's dangerous. Because that pitching staff is top 8 in baseball, in my opinion.
The player I still can't understand how his career fell apart during the pandemic and still has not really found a resurgence, honestly, has been Christian Yelich. I don't understand Christian Yelich that turned him to borderline the best player in baseball. Of course, Mike Trout still the best player.
He was,
in terms of at that time, one of the best players all around in baseball, to someone who could barely put a bat on the ball. And just like, for example, like Cody Bellinger, who, by the way, of course, opportunity as well for him. But I just don't understand how you go from an MVP caliber status to it looks like you could barely be worth $20 million in terms of a contract while playing on a baseball field. I've never seen it before, but this pandemic changed a lot for the Brewers and a lot for Christian Yelich. And Bellinger.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you can look at Bellinger and Yelich side by side and see the same downfall. After the World Series for Cody Bellinger, he's been horrible. You look at Yelich, he's been horrid. I mean, there's a difference between horrible and you're barely making $20 million a year. And Christian Yelich is at that point. And I know it could be the injuries, but to see such a sharp fall from grace in the 2-3 year time span for Yelich, it's just, what does he have to offer now? His glove's not as good as it was. His bat is ice cold. The only way that you could really put Bellinger over Yelich in any way is that Bellinger has some sort of a glove. And in our outfield, we needed a glove, and we got one in Cody Bellinger to join Ian Happ.
Let me ask you this question, going back to the Cubs point real quick, because of course you're talking about Bellinger, at least with the glove. If, let's say, the scenario, of course, I know you believe that they're going to be below 500, but if the scenario comes towards the trade deadline where the Cubs are on the realm, they may not be a wild card spot, but they're on the realm. They may be on the cusp of being near the NL Central lead. Let's say
They're near it.
5-6 games. Do you see the Cubs being buyers or sellers? Is the big question. I just don't know. I feel like with that team, you would probably have to be sellers rather than buyers in that scenario. And for the record, the same question happened last year for Baltimore, which is why you raised this question, because you look at the path Baltimore took.
And that's a really good question to ask, because we were supposed to be sellers at the deadline. I was mentally prepared for Contreras and Happ to be gone. And for both of them to stay, it gave me this era of that the front office didn't know what the hell they were doing. And this season, there is still a possibility that Happ could be sold. Obviously, with Pete Crow Armstrong coming up the pipeline as well, you're going to need a spot in that outfield, because PCA is amazing. So do you ship Happ now while his stock is that high? Because you could have done it last year and his stock would have been high as well. But if you give him another half season to be okay, prove yourself. Does he? And how much could we get for him? Because I'm not wanting to gut our farm system for a few halfway decent players. We've got Dansby, we've got Happ, we've got Horner, and when we've got Wisdom and Schwindel both healthy, those are probably two of the best power hitters in baseball. If you're looking at pure power, we're gonna have to sell. I don't see any way that we buy without completely blowing up the farm system.
And I want to ask you this one last question in regards to not the Cubs, but at least moving forward from. But of course, buying, selling, we know there's going to be a lot of discussion about Shohei Ohtani this season. Do the Angels finally trade him and so on? But looking at this baseball season, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on in free agency. And of course, we mentioned the NL ultimately really being the big beneficiary in terms of the AL and the NL, because the NL absolutely loaded up on key star players for this upcoming season, for the future as well. Who on that NL side stands out to you after all this that says, wow, on paper, you could win a World Series this year?
I've been saying this on paper for the past 2 years. I believe it's the New York Mets. I will potentially die on that hill, burned on a stake, but I do believe that on paper, the New York Mets could be the best team in baseball. You bring in Kodai Senga, you bring in Justin Verlander, the reigning Cy Young winner, and you have Scherzer as well. You have 3 aces in your rotation. The lineup's still good. You made Brandon Nimmo a lifer, giving him a massive extension. And the team is still really good. They just need to be consistent. They gotta play quality baseball day in and day out, because the NL East, you look at the Mets, you look at the Braves, you look at the Phillies. The Phillies are my dark horse to win the division, but at the end of the day, it's going to be between the Braves and the Mets. Those 3 teams on paper could win a World Series. They could.
They could on paper, but I'll say like this, even if Philly wins the division, Bryce Harper's still a loser, and that team will never win a World Series.
I love me some Kyle Schwarber, and
I know they turn around, they pick up Trey Turner, but I just don't see why Trey Turner uses Bryce Harper as a reasoning for him going. To me, again, I still feel Philadelphia is one of those teams that are surely able to find a way to choke in the playoffs. And on the AL side, I don't know what to say. I really don't
know. I mean, you look at I mean, God, you look at the Astros, you lose your ace. After that, it's a bunch of, don't get me wrong, this rotation's quality, but is it consistent? You look at Javier, you look at Valdez, you look at McCullers. It's just, can the Astros pitching staff rise up to the occasion knowing that their golden god, Justin Verlander, is playing in Queens?
And there's going to be a lot of opportunity this year in the AL side to prove something. Of course, the Yankees added Carlos Rodon. I personally don't think they're anywhere near a World Series, let alone even make.
I was surprised that Rodon, in my opinion, was the only big signing y'all got. Apart from Aaron Judge, because that was your top priority this offseason. Bring back Judge. But you go and sign Carlos Rodon, a guy who's been consistent, who's been an ace for like two good years. He's had 2 good years.
Yeah, 2 good years. I don't know if you saw Grant, I think Frankie Montas 2.0. And
me too. I listened to that.
I'm not going to complain about the price you got him from. I'm not going to complain, but the Yankees didn't need a pitcher. They needed someone at the end of the day that could hit a baseball.
They needed bats.
Everyone that went there went to the National League at the end of the day.
You guys needed bats, and you didn't get any. What are you guys going to do now? Are you going to ship off IKF and Josh Donaldson for prospects and cash considerations?
They're going to be on the team opening day because the Yankees are going to run it back because they believe that Aaron Hicks can still play good baseball. Granted, he couldn't hit it. And he believes that Josh Donaldson, somehow those stats against, on the road are going to play such a big factor when the Yankees play the postseason on the road because they're not going to win the AL East.
Exactly.
That's the kind of delusion that Brian Cashman has, but for some reason we signed him for a 5-year extension. Before I continue to go on a rant anymore, Tristan, I thank you for coming on Sports Speak here for episode 121. And where can anyone find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram at Introspective. It's a 1 and a 0. Introspective. Find me on Instagram. I am going to be starting my own podcast soon, so be on the lookout for that. Now, definitely keep in touch with you guys to bring you guys into the fold, because the overall sports climate is going to be rampant this spring. XFL, USFL, baseball, NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, motorsports all coming back into full swing. I'm a huge combat sports guy. The first couple months of the UFC calendar are stacked with great fights, and I can't wait to cover them.
Oh, Dean, I'll tell you from a UFC perspective, it's going to be electric once that season gets ramped and going. Just from a betting perspective, it is a bettor's paradise.
Oh, it is. I mean, you look at Makhachev Volkanovski. I mean, you could see Makhachev opening as a -400, but that money for Volk is going to be there.
So there's going to be a lot to look forward to. But Tristan, again, I thank you for coming on the show here on Sports Speak. And a reminder as well that you can follow us on Twitter at Sports Speak Live, as well as finding the show in episode 121 or any other episode on Spotify by searching Sports Speak in the search tab. However, from Eddie Kalegi, I've been Tim Moore alongside Tristan Biesel saying so long here from episode 121 of Sports Speak. The next time we come on here on Sports Speak for episode 122, we'll be talking a lot about NASCAR with that season coming up. And if I'm not mistaken, granted, I know Eddie's not on the camera, I believe we'll be talking to my good old friend Eric O'Connor as the Supercross season is just getting ready to get ramped up, as I believe that's starting on the 7th. So that should be starting up this coming weekend. However, we hope you enjoyed episode 121, and we'll see you next time for episode 122 right here on Sports Speak.